Have you ever felt?
Are you listening? Damn.
And what's good, people? Sorry, I didn't mean to have it up there. I am Jesse Moeller, and welcome to the Fantasy Lowdown. This is our episode number 5. We're changing it up a little bit. We're not necessarily focusing on game tape with this episode. We can involve some of it, but this one involves more strategy based. And I kind of want to talk about the tight end position and what has happened this year, which has completely transformed it. Because if you went in early in the offseason when we were doing our drafts or our best ball drafts, we're like, it's the early tight ends or just skip tight ends and hope you hit late, right? Because there's those few guys. We're talking, Andrews, we're talking Kelsey, we were talking TJ Hawkinson, we thought Pitts was in that tier, we said Darren Waller was in there, and then it kind of fell off to, the Dallas Goederts, Pat Freiermuth, David Njoku, kind of those in-between guys. And you'll notice those in-between guys absolutely just been face planting for you. So it's kind of the problem with tight ends in the position in general. We were hoping that we would get some late round rookies and like second round picks, and those guys are hitting very well. We've had the people coming on strong lately, and this has to do correlation with strong quarterback play, particularly Kyler Murray coming back in Arizona, Josh Dobbs going from Arizona, where he was hyper targeting tight ends, to Minnesota, and it doesn't matter. Josh Dobbs is hyper targeting TJ Hawkinson at an absurd rate. And we get nice. It's just nice to see. And we have Jake Ferguson doing his thing. Dalton Schultz is involved in one of the best passing attacks in the NFL, so he's getting propped up that way. It's just the tight end position is looking very nice for the first time in a long time in Dynasty. I mean, obviously we lost Dallas Goedert. That hurts. Darren Waller, that one's killing a lot of people in Dynasty. I saw plenty of trades for him in the offseason where he was going for value. I even shipped him off in a league where I got in early. I was like, you know what? I need a tight end. I was rebuilding. I was like, I'm going to make the push this year. Got Darren Waller. And by week 4, I was like, it's not working this season. So I shipped off Darren Waller, shipped off a bunch of other players. And I'm glad I did because, my goodness, it is rough for those guys in Dynasty. But what I more wanted to talk about is how it's not just the haves and have-nots. We have a solid core group we're building around along with the old guy, Travis Kelce. Like, there's Travis Kelce. He's still a difference maker. Not as big of a difference maker as he was last year because that was basically just not repeatable. The tight end position as a whole took a nosedive last year, and it was just Travis Kelce having one of his best, if not his best season. So it kind of made his value even more absurd than it was, where we were talking about him being the 101. And obviously, if you took a 101, you're disappointed, but you're still happy to have him on your roster because you watch Travis Kelce, and it's just like it's nothing else in the NFL. He's connected to Patrick Mahomes. And we talk about this all the time when we get into the Kyle Pitts discussion, which is the fact he's connected to an awful offense with terrible quarterback play. And there's just no way for him to make even on that cost and that value, which was my mistake. We always talk about just bet on talent, but situation matters with tight ends. Like, you'll notice this, if you don't have a good quarterback, if you don't have a good offense, it's really difficult because a lot of these tight ends are not seeing the same amount of receptions the wide receivers are. You're not seeing tight ends getting 150 targets. Like, we have guys such as Kelsey and Andrews who can do it on occasion. But realistically, you're happy if a tight end gets 100 receptions because a lot of times offenses don't feature tight ends. They're the ancillary piece of an offense, right? And if they're an ancillary piece of the offense, it's just so much harder. So you have to have the good quarterback play that they can support an offense, and you have a tight end that could be efficient in that usage. And it's very hard for those guys. And this is the Dallas Goedert, the Pat Freiermuth of the world, where, we thought Pat Freiermuth was in a good offense. Obviously, that is not the case. Pittsburgh offense is not good. Kenny Pickett's not a good quarterback. The whole situation is kind of broken. It's bringing down Deontay. George Pickens is up and down. Najee Harris, Jalen Warren, all those guys are suffering. But he had an injury for Freiermuth, which kills him for this year. You'll notice when I bring up the tight end rankings and where these guys are at, that you can see a couple of these guys are really far down. So if you want to do the quote buy low now and get in, you totally can. Because Freiermuth has had a good start to his career. It's just not what we had hoped. And interestingly enough, we have the influx of these rookies, along with Trey McBride, who's basically a rookie this year because his rookie season was historically awful. It was rough to the point where we were thinking, should we even be in on this guy? You look at his metrics and how PFF rating and all that stuff, it was just bad news bears. So if you got in on Trey McBride in this offseason where you got him for dirt cheap, about week about around week 4 in a different league, I had James Cook and I had David Njoku, right? And one of my buddies in that league wanted James Cook. I was like, all right, my team's kind of in the middle. I was like, I'm going to shift him to a wide receiver. So I was like, all right, I want Pittman because he wasn't even going to give me a first round pick for Cook. I was like, all right, give me Michael Pittman, right? And this was before Pittman was, fully cruising with Gardner Minshew, right? And we went back and forth on this deal for a while. He was like, fine, I'll give you McBride and Pittman for Cook and Njoku. And like right now, it sounds like a smash, right? A month plus ago, it does not sound like a smash. So yeah, he ended up adding a 3rd round pick on that deal. So it turned into, McBride and Pittman in a 3rd for James Cook and Njoku. Like I'm feeling fantastic about that deal with how that worked out, right? But this is all gets back to values and timing the market specifically, because if you're able to do that with players where either you sell them off when they're like valued extremely at like a very high rate, or if you jump down lower tiers, like when you buy low and then they raise back up in value, because this is what Dynasty is. The market is so ridiculous. Not as with Dynasty, it's just light speed. Everything is within 5 minutes, I swear, values change. So I'm going to use one of my favorite tools, which is Dynasty Daddy. I love it because it's a free tool. It uses actual websites and trades, so it actually is. It's a really good tool. And the best part about it is it's free. So if you haven't used it, go check it out. It's dynasty-daddy.com. And I'll pull it up. These are kind of the tight end rankings. So these are the Dynasty tight end rankings. And you could switch it. As you see right here, the top right corner has keep, trade, cut values. You can move them around if you want. So let me go to Dynasty Daddy real quick. So we'll switch it to Fantasy Calc. And you see how the values shift, right? Travis Kelce moves back up to the top. Depending on what you're using, you can use Dynasty Superflex. And then it even has redraft values on here. But there's different, I use the keep, trade, cut. It's really easy. If you want ones with actual trades, that's Fantasy Calc. So we'll go off of Fantasy Calc right now. Travis Kelce is the tight end one. And if you notice one thing on here is the fact that his value is 5,295 points. Now, if you go to keep, trade, cut, you see the difference. His value pretty much stays the same, but Sam Laporta, TJ Hawkinson, Mark Andrews is all skyrocketing. Now, there is a case for Sam Laporta to be tight end one if you really want to go that far. But realistically, you can make that case for Dalton Kincaid. And we're going to be getting the Trey McBride discussion. If you really want to get bullish, you could do that with Trey McBride too. But honestly, Hawkinson's only 26. Andrews is only 28. These guys are not old. So they're not going anywhere anytime soon. The thing is, the issue with Hawkinson is his quarterback situation is completely in flux. We don't know who his quarterback's going to be. If it's Josh Dobbs next year, that's fantastic because Josh Dobbs hyper targets tight ends like nobody's business. He freaking loves tight ends. It's just been an onslaught of targets for him. So that's fantastic. But getting back to kind of Laporta and Kincaid, McBride, Kyle Pitts, it's more like the young discussion. And we get down a little bit further. You have, Mayer, Musgrave. But you'll notice there's kind of a tier separation differential. So I don't understand why Sam Laporta is 5,713 points and Trey McBride is 3,850 points. Something is off with these rankings. And even Dalton Kincaid should not be 700 points. They need to be a lot closer. Now, these are similar to my rankings. If you're a contender, you just write out Kelce. It doesn't matter. He's too good. You have Andrews there. I don't know why you would come off Andrews as the tight end one. He's been just fantastic his entire career since he stepped on the field, and he is Lamar Jackson for a long time, and he's still a focal point of that offense. This is what you want from a tight end, right? This is a difference-making tight end connected to one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL. The offense is good. He's a focal point of it. Checks all the boxes, right? His athletic profile is great. He's everything you want. He's not slow. So this is kind of when I get into what do we value in tight ends? This is what I wanted to hit on. So it's not just the draft capital. Draft capital is important. The thing about draft capital is it gives you a floor. You have if you follow Fantasy World Guru, David Guntieri, you've heard him talk about this all the time. It's you basically have an elite hit rate with first round tight ends. So you see that with these first round tight ends. It gives you a top 12. But realistically, the issue with that for me is our top is a top 12 tight end? Does it even matter? Is it even a thing? Does it give you difference making production? No, it does not. So I'm much more interested in the hit rates of top 5 tight ends because that's where the bread and butter is. Those are the true difference makers of the position. That's where we're always chasing. We're chasing these hammers or we're chasing these guys who give you warp or wins over replacement. That's what we're looking for. So that is much more important to me. And funny enough, you almost have a 50% hit rate from round 1 rookie tight end. So Kyle Pitts, Dalton Kincaid. Next year, Brock Bowers is going to enter that discussion, right? I'm pretty much treating Sam Laporta as a round 1 rookie. I mean, he just missed out, right? But it's just, sometimes it's how it happens. It's just that cutoff where it's like pick 32, nope, pick 34. He's like, okay, you know what I mean? So he's close enough. It's there. The difference between him and like Michael Mayer is Mayer just doesn't have that same upside, like athletic upside. And I think that is the differentiating decision. And obviously he has an awful quarterback situation, but like we're seeing Aiden O'Connell, he's just hyper targeting Devontae Adams. It's hurting Jacoby Myers, it's hurting Michael Mayer. It's hurting those guys. So that's kind of the thing. If you don't have a quarterback who can make his progressions and make his reads, sometimes tight ends get left out because if you're not the first or second option on your offense, and this is what Andrew Cooper talks about all the time, if you're not a top 2 option on your offense, it's so difficult for a tight end to just be good in fantasy because then you're living off these freaking touchdowns. And we see this with the Evan Ingrams of the world. It's good, but it's not elite, right? It's fine. It's passable. You're okay with having that on your roster, but it doesn't move the needle. Like if you ever try to trade these guys in Dynasty, it gives you nothing. So what I find so interesting is I want to share this tab real quick. This is a league format tool, and this is wins over replacement. And I wanted to get into tight ends because this is fascinating to me. So what wins over replacement, or these are the warp tour. You'll see these guys that are called the league breakers. Let me pull this up for you real quick to make sure you guys are looking at the same thing because I'm on different screens. So 1 second, let me pull it up and we will have it. So, all right. So this is what we have right here. This is wins over replacement, and this is a massive thing. These are the true difference makers in fantasy football. You see Josh Allen, you see Tyreek Hill, you see Jalen Hurts, Christian McCaffrey, Justin Herbert, Keenan Allen, A.J. Brown. CeeDee Lamb has just entered that tier, by the way. He was not up there before, but he's been the wide receiver 1 the past month. His usage and actual just wide receiver 1, like punch rate, he's been elite. So it's no surprise he jumps into that tier. Interestingly enough, you see T.J. Hawkinson, he's right there because he's been fantastic. And he just had just ridiculous game. So yeah, it makes sense that he is there, which he deserves to be there. He's been really good. I know we talk about Hawkinson because he's just been disappointing. Like he gives you the volume, but it hasn't really been much else with it. But at some point, it's like the Zach Ertz of the world. You kind of have to respect it. He's not going to be on my tight end 1. I was fading him. I much rather would have had Kyle Pitts, which I've always been a Kyle Pitts guy. This year I started to kind of quietly come off of Kyle Pitts. I didn't want to announce to the world. I'm like, oh, fade Kyle Pitts. But then it got to the point where I was like, you know what? Like the more I dug into this, like I just can't do it with Kyle Pitts because you're still paying a substantial cost. Like he still costs you a good amount of like good value. Like you're good luck getting him for a deal. So I threw Pitts into a deal where I'm rebuilding because my team is currently the 104. We're like 80 points outside the 101. I don't think we're going to get the 101, but Pitts still had enough value where I was like, you know what? Just get him off my roster. I don't care. So basically I traded Pitts. I traded Hollywood Brown. And there's one other player. I got back three mid-seconds, and I got back Christian Watson, and I got back another younger, it's like a Darth Vader running back. But people hated this trade on Twitter. I really did not because I was trying to shed points. So I knew Hollywood Brown was going to outscore Christian Watson. And I just wanted to get more draft capital for Kyle Pitts because what I expected to happen with Kyle Pitts is what's happening. People are getting more frustrated, so he's deteriorating more. You'll notice you will not see Kyle Pitts anywhere in this category because he's not an elite player for fantasy. He's not a league breaker. If you search him, so you'll see these totals right here. This is wins above replacement. So what this is like these players will give you an extra win on your fantasy team. So if you have Josh Allen or if you have Tyreek Hill, if you have those 2 guys, that's 2.5 extra wins per season they're giving you. That's massive. Now, if we pull up Pitts, right, you'll see this. He's a bench piece. 0.16 warp. He's not giving you anything. That's the problem. He's had one good week, 8 weeks where he's killed you, and that's the thing. So if you go to actually warp and you look based on by position, he is way down the list. Warp is 0.16, so he's going to be right here with the Hunter Henry. Yeah, there he is right there. Position rank 18. His rank is 125. So there's 124 better players for fantasy. That's just brutal. And we go up, we see Jonas Smith. There's Trey McBride because he's come on strong recently. Logan Thomas, you go up to Dallas Goedert, Darren Waller. These guys have all been better than Odell Landry, Jake Ferguson, Dalton Schultz. I think the Ferguson and Schultz aspect in Dynasty is really, really interesting. Because it's kind of similar to T.J. Hawkinson, right? We thought this with Hawkinson where we're thinking these guys are, they're just not that good. They're going to get volume. That's fine. But, like, those guys, I would honestly rather just I would trade Pitts away for them plus. Like, I would take a second plus one of those guys. Like, I would much rather just do that and not do this Kyle Pitts thing. Like, I'm completely just out on Kyle Pitts until that situation improves. It's brutal. His target share's gone down. His target rate's gone down. His snaps, his routes are okay. But man, the offense they limit him. They're only throwing 30 times a game. So like, if you're only throwing 30 times a game and you're not seeing elite target share, you're seeing 18% target share. It's so difficult to be a fantasy impact guy. So this is where you're seeing Pitts up and down. And a lot of times it's down just because offense sucks. And we saw with Heineke, we're going to go back. They're going to go back to Ritter because Heineke's injured. And it's just like, you can't support those guys. And Drake London's barely surviving. I mean, Bichon's the focal point of the offense, but it's just like the entire offense hurts. So this is I think the situation we misconstrued, particularly myself in general, was Atlanta. Like, I was completely wrong about that offense. I thought those guys could be fine, but I think we got way out over our skis betting on talent and not realizing the situation was that dire, right? Now, for instance, on the flip side, we have someone, Trey McBride, who was awful, but what everyone did not expect, well, not everyone, I think there was a giant discourse about this. This was the Kyler Murray effect. We saw with Clayton Tune, they put up like 50 passing yards. It was gross after they had Josh Dobbs for a few weeks. It was nice. Josh Dobbs was doing good things to support fantasy assets. Bringing Clayton Tune, don't know why they decided to start him. Just rough. They couldn't do a damn thing. And you see this with these just really bad quarterbacks. They bring the entire offense down. And this is the Clayton Tune effect where we're like, oh, Clayton Tune, cool. Maybe it's something. It's like, no, he's definitely not an NFL quarterback. Like, I hate to break to you guys, but he just can't do anything. So then they bring back Kyler Murray, and it's just like, oh my gosh, this is what good offense looks like, right? He's a good quarterback, and it makes a world of difference. And you're seeing Trey McBride I think he's the first tight end since like 1988 to put up 100 yards for the Arizona Cardinals. He put up 130 yards. His last 2 games, he's been absurd, and he's come on strong. Part of the issue with McBride, though, is like they were starting Ertz early on in the season. I don't know what Jonathan Gannon was thinking, right? You're starting this older player. He's not going to help you because your team's not going to win, right? So, like, why were they playing him over McBride? It was weird. And it took McBride a while to come on. And then Ertz got hurt, and McBride was still not there. It's just like, man, what is going on? And finally, a couple weeks ago, it kicked where you saw the snap share and his routes go up. And we're like, okay, there's something to go off of, right? This is what we're seeing. And interestingly enough, McBride playing nowhere near the amount of games Kyle Pitts has or the route and all that. But he's already made a bigger impact this year than Kyle Pitts has the entire season. And this is the issue with the Kyle Pittses of the world. And I don't mean to turn this into just a hate on Kyle Pitts. I think he's an elite talent. It's just so we have to take into more situation in Dynasty, which we do this a lot with like how our Dynasty reflects redraft rankings. This is why guys like McCaffrey, or Diggs and Hill and Kelsey, they're also highly ranked, right? Because if it does crumble, and this is happening with Devontae Adams because the situation got so much worse, the value takes a hit. And this is kind of is what it is. Investing in these older players, you have to know what you're investing in. And the way I look at dynasty values is there's 2 ways players can earn value. It is production or it's youth, where you're expecting that young player to step into value at some point, right? They can't be terrible young, because that value evaporates. We've seen this with bad players. You see this with the Jalen Ragers of the world, N'Keal Harry. Like, they hold value for a little bit, but this was a few years ago where they were still holding it. Now you see it where a guy like face plants in year 1, that value just tanks. Obviously, it's a little different if you have a round 1 rookie. This is why people are still holding out hope for Quentin Johnston, even though he's been just downright awful in fantasy. But with tight ends, it's a little different because we know how difficult of a position is because you also have to block. You have to learn that, all the assignments, all the right. Like, you have to learn a lot as tight end. So it's harder to step in right away. So this is what's been so impressive about Sam Laporta and Dalton Kincaid in particular. Mayer's getting he had 1 pop game, but he's getting held back by that offense. So, like, there's no way I would have Mayer in that tier of those guys. So this is why I like looking at WARP and comparing it. Now, you can go to player win percent. You can go to, if we go fantasy points, you'll see the difference. Like, it's just rough, man. So, like, the WARP, it's a really good thing to look at. Like, this is why I like it. But if we look at fantasy points down here's our 3rd tier. Like, we have Laporta, 141 points, right? And it just drops off. And then we get down to Logan Thomas, 149. And then we have TJ Hawkins. He's 195. Hawkinson's a massive edge. Like, it's really hard to dispute TJ Hawkinson in that tier 1. So, like, why I wanted to bring this is because I wanted to use these kind of tiers and just talk about how do we go about trading or moving within these tiers, right? So if we just look at tight ends, right? We'll look at these guys. The 2 guys that have been elite are TJ Hawkinson and Travis Kelce, right? You see it there. Kelsey's there. Andrews was actually close. He had a bad game last week, so he came down a little bit. But Andrews, Laporta, even Komet's been in this range. Komet's the one I don't know how to value. I struggle just immensely with him. I'm going to pull up their actual player rankings. So we're going to show this tab instead. You can see right here how these guys are ranked. And it gives you a little idea of where to go there, right? So you see these rankings where Laporta, Hawkinson, they're all similar enough. I'll say Andrews, Kelsey, and Kincaid, and then there's like a substantial cutoff. Obviously, there is a gap between Laporta and Kincaid. It's about, on this value, they'll say it's like a third. But to me, like I prefer Kincaid to Laporta just because I think he's a better player. The hard part is with these values, they fluctuate so much. Like you think you could move one for one, it's really hard to. Now, if you don't care and you're like a contending team, yeah, I'll happily go for the Mark Andrews of the world. I really don't want to move one of these guys for Kelsey. But if I had Kelsey on the flip side of a contending team, I don't want to move off of him because I'm just going to ride that production. It may cost you at some point because like the fall's gonna happen, but Kelsey just looks freaking elite. Even at 34, it doesn't matter with Kelsey. It's just wild. Now we have McBride, who's 10 years younger, right? That's a 10-year age difference. But my biggest issue with some of these values is like, who plays in 10-year windows? Nobody's like, oh yeah, you get him for the next 10 years. Like, no, man, stuff changes. Quarterbacks, teams, like everything. Somebody gets injured. Like we see this with Pitts. The one thing I noticed with his tape is he looks different this year. Like it's noticeably different. His routes are not crisp. He's not as explosive. He just looks worse. And I don't know if this is a lingering effect from his knee injury that he had with the surgery, but something does not seem right about him. So that's what really shifted when I did I think it was the third or second episode when it was on Kyle Pitts, and I was just watching this like, this is gross. I can't do this anymore. Like this is the thing that broke my Kyle Pitts love, where I was like, no, all right, we're cutting bait with Kyle Pitts. So we just start shipping him off. I packaged him with Devin Achane and like it's a couple like a first and other things for Jalen Hurts, Josh Jacobs, and like something else. Like I had a big package of players and picks, and I condensed it into Jalen Hurts. So I got the QB1 or QB2. I got Josh Jacobs, who's been very good for me as I'm a contending team trying to repeat in my home league. So I was like, you know what? Let's make the move. Blah, 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 do that. Interestingly enough, I've found myself buying a lot of Mark Andrews in this tier, where it seems like even though he's valued here, people, they prefer Laportas and Kincaids and those guys to him. I tried desperately to move Kyle Pitts into any one of these guys. Like after like week 2, it just wasn't happening. So I had to kind of cut bait in a different way, where I had to like not make it a 1-for-1 swap. I had to add in pieces or go up and like pay up to get off of Kyle Pitts. Interestingly enough, you could have done the Trey McBride thing if you wanted to bet on him or any one of these guys, Mayer, Musgrave, but Mayer, Musgrave, the offenses are nowhere near as good. So this is the thing holding those guys back. And Musgrave's, as much as I like Musgrave coming out, there are big red flags with his profile. So it's that on top of it being attached to Jordan Love. Like it's difficult for me to see him being a truly elite like ceiling play, but he is the ceiling throw to make if you're wanting to really jump in and go, you know what, screw it, I want that guy. We already talked a little bit about Pat Freiermuth. Schultz is 27. He's not old. Njoku's 27, but you see how these values are way down. And Darren Waller in particular, like 21-24, his value has absolutely tanked because of the injury, right? He's done for the year. He's not coming back. He's 31. We have not had some good times with him, man. It's rough. So if we go to his trade market, you see the volume, you see where he is in these trades. I'll go back to the inside, pull up his value, but he's just gone down so much. He's lost 22% of his value in the last 30 days. That makes sense. His all-time high value, you see it in the last 90. So the last 3 months, he was tight end 8. Right now, where he's at, he's sitting at tight end 19. So this is the worst he's been in a long time. So it's just very unfortunate for him. But why I like this trade calculator or the trade database is you can look up deals for guys that you're trying to pull. So we're going to pull up here on this tab and kind of jump into trades because these are pulling actual trades. So it's not just fictional trades. It's trades you can see to give your eyes off ideas, because that's one thing I like about trading is I'll go check and say, like, I'll see deals I never thought about doing, right? Or I'll pack. And this is like the Josh Jacobs thing where like a couple weeks ago, you could have gotten for a third or 2/3, right? But now, like the price in him in Superflex leagues, contending teams, it's like pushing to this first range for certain people. I'm like, I'm not paying that. That's too much because it's a 1-year thing and it's only for contending teams. So, like, if you need cheap production, like, I'm fine paying a second for Josh Jacobs. I just sent out an offer of a second for him like an hour ago, where I have Russell Wilson and just a bunch of injured dust quarterbacks. So I desperately need it on my contending team. So, like, sometimes you just have to pay the piper. we'll see if it works out. There's probably gonna be a little bit of a haggle. Like I'm not gonna go above a second, but I'll do like a second plus third or something like I'll, or take an ancillary piece. So this is kind of like you have to know your team structure and what you're building around. But let's just go look at Dalton Kincaid because I want to look at him and I want to compare Kyle Pitts. Actually, so let's go Kyle Pitts. Yeah, so we're gonna go Pitts. Yeah, 2 quarterbacks. So interestingly enough, if you search with these 2 players and the trades, we have one from 15 days ago. Let's actually just clear it out and we're gonna search for Kyle Pitts. So we have a trade from Kyle Pitts from a day ago. We have Kyle Pitts, Kirk Cousins, and a 2024 first. It doesn't tell you how early the first is. Let's just sort of mid. This team's rebuilding, obviously, because they're taking on Cousins, they're taking on Kyle Pitts, and they're getting a first, and they're sending off Christian McCaffrey and Evan Ingram. Honestly, like I get the value side of this, but man, I'm taking McCaffrey on that deal. Like that's what I want to do. Now, interestingly enough, you'll see some of these bigger deals. Now, there's one from 5 days ago, which is fascinating because this is basically like tight end. You got Amon-Ra. There's a first round pick. So this is actually, I think this is my deal. I need to double check because this looks exactly like a deal I did the other day. So this is my deal. Actually, funny enough. So I sent Kyle Pitts for Mark Andrews. I packaged Amon-Ra St. Brown and like a late third for what was projected to be the 103 in this upcoming draft, right? So my thought processes was Andrews, Amon-Ra St. Brown. That's a swap. I got so much pushback on Twitter for this, but why I believe this is because I want that tight end, that elite tight end, and that's Andrews to me. And I know Amon-Ra has been fantastic, and he holds more value. This is also a 0.5 tight end bonus, so like Andrews is going to be a little bit more valuable in this league. But start 10, 12 teams, so like only starting 10 players, so there's only 120 players, right? So that value addition, it's just much harder to replace Mark Andrews' production than it is Amon-Ra St. Brown's. And that was the differentiator for me. And obviously, like those two, and you can go back and forth. Like I probably prefer Amon-Ra St. Brown in most leagues, but contending team, making the push and having Kyle Pitts as my starting tight end, like this was the thing where I was like, I gotta get out of this. So I tried to send a second with Kyle Pitts. I tried to send Dotson with Kyle Pitts to get Andrews in like a second, third swap. The guy said no, and he countered with this, and I thought about this for a while. And I was like, you know what? I'm basically sending Kyle Pitts for the 103. I gotta do this. So this is the deal I ended up doing. We'll see what happens. That team is actually, they also just traded off DeAndre Hopkins, and they traded off, who else was it? Another like veteran wide receiver, or James Conner too. So they traded off a couple other pieces like they did like the other day. So I was like, wow. So it's looking like it's going to be top 3. So I'm fine with this deal. Realistically, I'm going to end up with one of those 2 elite quarterbacks, Drake May, or, Marvin Harrison Jr. You could do Brock Bowers. I'm not freaking doing Brock Bowers with this rookie tight end stuff. I would rather just get a cheaper version of it like that. Like there's some, he's really an elite tight end prospect. He's one of the best along with Kyle Pitts that we've seen. But man, we don't know where situation is going to be. He's going to, like, if he's playing for it's not going to be Chicago. But he could be in Washington, and we don't know how that's going to go with Sam Howell. Maybe that'll work out. Maybe it won't. If his quarterback situation is not good and that offense isn't good, like, I just worry about how involved Brock Bowers is going to be. Because, like, he's a small, like, this is my main concern with Brock Bowers. He's a smaller tight end, so he's going to be very much falling into, like, what we're talking about with Dalton Kincaid, where the thing about Dalton Kincaid is he went to like the nuts offense with Josh Allen. So it was like, okay, you're tied to Allen. Allen's got that mega deal. Like he's on his rookie deal. They're together and they're paired for a while, and they don't have a freaking wide receiver 2 or like a second option. Gabe Davis is not that guy. So this is what, like, wow, I was like, you know what? This is why I'm so high on Dalton Kincaid, is because his receiving profile, and you watch him on tape, he can like run the seam. He can actually push it downfield himself. So like he's going to be a very good tight end for a long time in this league. So, like, if I was not contending, I would prefer him to, like, Kelsey or Andrews. But on contending teams, I'm going to prefer Andrews. It's just more secure. You know what you're getting. Kelsey, same thing. Like, obviously, I wouldn't put him into Kelsey. Like, that's a little bit too risky for me. But if I had Kelsey, I wouldn't just trade straight up for that. Like, I wouldn't want to do that because I know that as good as it looks, like, it's just still risky. I just need more production on those guys. So this is kind of how I'm viewing the position in general. But, like, you see some of these deals, and this is the thing. Like, you can actually move these guys into significant pieces if you're willing. Obviously, this deal's freaking absurd. We're not going to talk about this. But here, we'll just say it's a mid-round, first-round pick. Like, this is Kyle Pitts' value. Honestly, I don't even really want to give up a first-round pick for Kyle Pitts. Like, that's where I'm at with Kyle Pitts right now. I would rather just hold the first because realistically, Pitts isn't going to give you production this year. So, like, his value is going to decline. That first round pick's value is not going to decline. Obviously, the idea of Kyle Pitts is very good in theory. And the one caveat is if they somehow find their way to upgrade that quarterback position in the offseason or whatever, Kyle Pitts will be looking great. But until then, I'm just not doing that. Now, you see a deal which is really interesting down here, too. We have Kyle Pitts, 2 firsts, a second, third, and fourth round pick for Keenan Allen, Jonathan Taylor, down the board. So we'll do this as, let's say Keenan Allen is the second and third. Like, we'll say that's Keenan Allen, even so I think he's like a late run. But, like, realistically, you can get Keenan Allen for 2 twos. That's fine. We'll say Laporta is basically one of these ones. We'll say he's the 1 and the 4, sure. And then you basically have Pitts going for a 1 into Jonathan Taylor. Like, that's kind of how this deal breaks down. Obviously, this is really good value and where these picks go, but this class is looking legit. So I don't mind if you're rebuilding, getting a Kyle Pitts like this way, along with multiple picks and investing this way. But it's really nice to get Sam Laporta. You get Jonathan Taylor, and you get Keenan Allen, who's going to be just an absolute monster. So I give you both sides of this deal. This Eckler one's wild to me. But yeah, I'd take Eckler. Like, I view them similarly as far as like a value range, but like I'll just write out Eckler. I'll be fine with that. Obviously, you're a contending team. You're making a move like this, right? But this is an easier way to get into an Eckler without having to pay a substantial amount. Obviously, Pitts still hold that name cachet. Like, that's the thing. So you can move him into these bigger assets. Obviously, this doesn't have to be the Kyle Pitts thing, but this is just choosing him as the tight end du jour. Now let's more focus on Mark Andrews and look at that value and see how we move around these tiers. The interesting thing with Andrews is like someone did a first round pick in a joke. We take Andrews there. Depending on where the first round pick, the second and the third fall, I think that's fair for Andrews. The Freiermuth in the first, yeah, I want Andrews. You're seeing a lot of these deals like this, and this was like Kelsey a couple of years where people are like, oh yeah, just tier down, get a first on top. Obviously, if it's a late first, you're gonna want the Andrews side. It's an early first. Yeah. So as much as I love Tank Dell, like this deal, I love. Like, I'm a big fan of Tank Dell. I think he's top 20 wide receiver in Dynasty. And the second, I'm taking Andrews every time. Like, I'm getting Andrews. Dell could be really good. Like, he might be the best wide receiver in Houston. We don't know, but it's just like, what's his ceiling, right? This is the biggest problem I have with these moves. If you're moving off an elite asset, so if you're moving off of a Mark Andrews, a Travis Kelce, or even these quarterbacks, right, and you're not getting back a guy with a potential elite ceiling, I think you're doing yourself a disservice. Like, so that's my issue with this. You have to be very careful about how you do this, right? And team building context comes into this a lot, right? Like, you could easily just tier down into, go down to the freaking Dalton Schultz or those guys. Like, you can do this for cheap. You can get cheap production from those guys, or Cole Kmet, who seems, as much as I've been fading Cole Kmet, at a certain point you have to be like, you know what? The guy's not bad. He might not be elite, but he's fine. So if you want to go the cheap route where you send a late second or something for like Cole Kmet, I'm fine doing that deal. That does not bother me at all. So I'm going to actually share one more real quick. Let me see if I can find it and kind of talk about values. So if we want to look at a different screen, I want to pull this up on Chroma. I can't find this anywhere. I don't know where it is. Interesting. I cannot find this. So, well, that's not going to work. All right. So sorry about that. I was going to pull that up, but let's just go to rankings right here. Did not see that. I think so. We'll pull this up again. Sorry about that, folks. Thought I had it. But where I like what to put, and there's like Taysom Hill, but we saw last week with Taysom Hill, like, he's just, that is the Johnny Smith thing. Like, it's going to fall apart at certain points. So you have to know, like, buying into these guys, you have to be careful. Don't be like, oh, I'm going to send a second for those guys. No, don't do that. Because we've seen it time and time again. You can ride these hot waves with these players, but they're not worth it. Now, if you want to get into Ferguson, or if you want to buy Goddard for cheap, sure. Same. It's like Logan Bell. Like, obviously these are not the rankings. These are the Warp Tool. But this is just the way to kind of think about valuing the tight end position. And notice, like, hey, we have a lot of good tight ends, which is surprising because going into the year, like, man, tight end sucks. Like, it's those early guys. But you have a good core of like 7 dudes where it's like, man, I really love what's going on here. So we're going to pull up the rankings again one more time with tight ends. Shift it back here. So as you can see, a lot of these tight ends are young too. Of the top 10 tight ends, there's only 2 that are over 30. It's Travis Kelce. It's George Kittle. Now, the interesting thing with George Kittle is he's going to give you those spike weeks, but he's limited from consistent production in that offense. We saw against Jacksonville, like, that was peak George Kittle, where he had the house call, basically had one-on-one coverage. Purdy just left it. He just left the guy in the dust. Like, Kittle still has that elite talent. He's one of my favorite tight ends I've ever watched in my life. Like, he might be my favorite fantasy player, or not fantasy, NFL player I've ever seen. Like, the guy's an incredible blocker. He can do everything for you. But injuries, he's been somebody that's dealt with a lot of injuries. He's been up and down with, touchdown production. He's getting touchdown production this year. And he's been good. He's giving you spike weeks, but like, why he's lower for me, because someone in my comments when I did my now post that blew up where I was saying dynasty managers watching Trey McBride pass Kyle Pitts in value with the no gifting. And one of the guys said, why isn't George Kittle in tier 1? And I go, why would George Kittle be in tier 1? And they started to make an interesting case for George Kittle, but he's older. The production he can give you is just not the same tier. Like, it's not difference making. It's close. It's good production. I think he's fine to have, but have you tried to trade George Kittle? That's the other aspect. It's like the Joe Mixons of the world. These older guys just don't hold that same value. So if they're not difference making production, they're older, they're just going to just be cheaper. That's how it is. Because you're getting hit with age. So if you're not giving me the production, like, that's the problem. So that's the thing. I mean, we can even sort by point. This thing, what is this? This point is weird. It should be higher points because this is not PPR point. I think this might be half PPR or something. Let me see. Let's see here. What are the points on this? That's all right. So, yeah, I just think it's very interesting to look at these guys. So we'll go down the list. I'm actually use Fancy Calc because I think that one's a little bit more fun. So we have Travis Kelce as tight end 1, Mark Andrews as tight end 2, TJ Hawkinson's tight end 3, Sam Laporta is tight end 4. Now there's a tier break there, interestingly enough, on Fantasy Calc, which I don't fully understand why there's a tier break from Kelce. And then those 3, the Andrews, Hawkinson, and Laporta. Kincaid is in that tier for me as well. But if I was using these tier breaks, like if I had Andrews, I would go see what the difference is between, Hawkinson, Laporta, Kincaid. If anybody's willing to give me a plus off of one of those guys, like a 2-3 swap, then I'm fine moving off of Andrews, right? Like, I view all of these guys very similar. Hawkinson, I don't think he has the same ceiling as those guys. Obviously, I could be eating dirt because Hawkinson's the tight end 1 right now. So realistically, he might just have that ceiling. It's just, that's the hard thing. You're fighting your biases with it. As much as we like to be not biased, sometimes you have biases. And then you kind of do that next tier. You have Kincaid and Pitts in their kind of own tier. These are Fantasy Calc tiers. They're not my tiers. I have Dalton Kincaid in tier 1. Kyle Pitts is in tier 2. Kyle Pitts is with the George Kittle. Evan Ingham's lower. He's just older. It's just not as good. Like, the production ceiling. Like, Trey McBride is my tight end 6 ahead of Kyle Pitts. So, like, I moved McBride after last week. I was like, he's up. Somebody said that he was top 10 tight end. I'm like, bro, you're like well behind the curve on this one. And then there's, Komet's in this tier. Goddard's in this tier, but he's dealing with an injury. Freiermuth was in this tier. He's out because injury just is not. And I do worry about that offense. So he's going to be a little bit lower. But then you have Musgrave, you have Mayer down here, you have Schultz and Njoku, where these like cheap producers. And then it just gets really cheap. Once you get past Mayer, and I would actually say Schultz and Njoku right here is kind of a cutoff. Tight end 17, it's really just you're getting guys that are like short-term ancillary pieces. The one piece is Greg Dulcich, which is interesting. So if you could get Dulcich for a third, like, yeah, I'll make that move. Like, I'll be betting on Dulcich. It's just the injuries with him have been rough, but he had a solid rookie year. And that offense, while Sutton has been by far the best option, like Judy's not doing anything, Mims isn't doing anything, there's a path for Dulcich to come back and be the second option on that team. And if that happens, it's, his value is going to take off. Like, I just find it hard to believe, even if Dulcich isn't that good, his value doesn't rise up because, like, that's just nothing. You're basically paying nothing to get a promising year 2 tight end who's coming off of injury. Obviously, why he's so cheap because there's injury involved. But realistically, if you had Goddard, how far down are you willing to go to get to Dulcich? Like, that's a fun little, slip. Like, will somebody give me Dulcich in an early 2 for Goddard? Obviously, this is like 1.5 tight end premium. So, if they're doing that, like, I'm kind of interested in that type of deal if I have Goddard because Goddard's capped. Like, this is the most frustrating thing with him. So obviously this is up for you to discuss how you want to do your tiers. But like while like looking at these, this gives me a community's consensus on these guys, right? Like this gives me the values of what they think, and then I can take that and construct deals based off of that. Because a lot of times I'll use how people view those players to make deals. I have my own like values of players, But you send those deals, if they're well off like consensus is, people are going to be like, yeah, I don't want to do that. So you kind of have to take that into account. And we'll see. So, yeah, I'm just checking right now. And it looks like that trade is still up for discussion. Interestingly enough, let's check direct messages. And it is not there. So, yeah. So that one is still on the table. But, yeah, this was me just kind of giving you a way to kind of look at the position in general to see where we're at. But I think we have a lot of good options. And that's the most interesting thing for me. Now, I've been rambling a little bit. We're going on 40 minutes here. But I love where the tight end position is at. And this is weird. Like, we have some very good pieces. Brock Bowers is coming. He's joining he's going to be tier 1. Like, it's just is what it is. Like, he's going to have the draft capital. I'm not ready to put him there yet. Like, he's going to be, he'll be above Pitts. So he's going to be my tight end 7, like straight out of the gate when he comes in the league. It'll be interesting to see where he lands. If he gets a good spot, then I'm going to push him up. But like, if he's in not a good offense, I'm not putting him up. He'll still be in that tier 2. Like, he's not going to be tier 1 guy for me yet. I know a lot of people are going to have him, like, they're going to talk about him as tight end 1, like we did with Kyle Pitts when he came into the league. But I'm not ready there yet. Like, I'm just fine just waiting. I'm going to let y'all draft him with the 103, 104. Y'all go through that early stuff with him. I will just wait. Like, I'm showing cheaper options. Like, I'm fine with going for a cheaper, like Kincaid, Laporta's, going to get those guys and just not worrying about it, right? Or, going to get McBride because it's not going to cost you near as much to get those guys. And what's the difference in production going to be? How good is Brock Bowers going to be? That's the discussion with him coming. Like, he has to be so good to pay off the cost. And this is what we talked about Kyle Pitts. The nice thing is that he held value for a ton of time. And some of this is him, in fact, just putting up 1,000 yards, setting the rookie record. But for fantasy points, only 10 points per game. Like, that didn't do much. Then he's at 8 points back-to-back again these last 2 years. So it's like, man, the value is really crumbling. I remember the rookie year, like the offers I got for Kyle Pitts in my home league where I did not turn down. I'm like, man, I tried to get George Kittle in 2 first. And he was like, no, I'm not doing that. And I was like, well, that's fine. I'm just going to enjoy this sweet, sweet production from Kyle Pitts. Oh, baby, do I regret that with that one. So, yeah, sometimes we let our biases creep into players. I just love everything about Kyle Pitts coming out. I just, it takes situation to it. So that's my fault. This is very much a learning curve for me. So I'm adjusting how I'm treating these tight ends. Like, I was very much in on Dalton Kincaid. The situation had a little bit more to do with that, right? I thought he was a fantastic prospect. Like, his ability to run routes, he's got great hands. He can go down the seat. He can do everything you need from a tight end receiving wise. But if you're not attached to that good situation, man, like, it's just this is what Travis Kelce's been so good. He's been with Patrick Mahomes. Like, this is the under-discussed part about Kelce. You take Kelce out of freaking, like, not playing with Mahomes, he's not going to be nowhere near as good. And this is the thing. Like, this is kind of the issue with Jefferson, too. Once Kirk Cousins is gone, we'll see how this impacts his value because it's going to be very hard for him to replicate that production. Who knows? Maybe Josh Dobbs is just a second coming and he can just keep it moving. But, man, I think it's going to be very difficult for Justin Jefferson to hit those points he was before. So this is why Jamar Chase is now with him, and I think people honestly just prefer Jamar Chase at this point straight up until we see it from Jefferson, which sucks, but like he's fantastic. If you have Jefferson, I think an interesting idea is to see the plus you can get on top of CeeDee Lamb right now, doing something like that, or you just ride him out. Like you have to get peak value. On one team, I traded him straight up for Bijan when he got hit. I was like, nope, we're a contending team. I'm okay, like missing out and just whatever, like I'll roll with Bijan. That has not gone according to plan. And I regret that one a little bit, but you know what? It is what it is. It's still the Bijan's an elite player. I'm not too worried about that one. But this is the joy of being in like 20+ dynasty leagues. Like I can, just go process not being in one league. If you're in one or a couple of leagues, I think it's a different discussion and a different story where you're like, whoo, got this guy. I don't know if I want to trade him. Like if you have Jalen Hurts on your roster right now, or if you have Travis Kelce in like one league, it's a lot harder to make those moves, right? Because the impact from that one league is so when you're in leagues, like a bunch of leagues, you'll have leagues where you win on, like we talked about this with Courtland Sutton last night. You win because Courtland Sutton caught the catch, and you also lose because Courtland Sutton caught that touchdown. Like, this is just how it goes sometimes. But yeah, this is our look into dynasty tight ends and where I'm going with the position. I'm really just investing in those top seven guys. I'm not too worried about there's a couple of guys that are fine for cheap production, but honestly, I want those elite guys because those elite guys, that's a core. They're all young with the exception of Kittle and Kelce. No one's going to hit 30 for a couple of years. Like, they're going to be producing for a long time. And they're going to be very good. Their situations are fantastic. The only one with the iffy situation is Hawkinson. But, like, I think he'll be fine. I'm not honestly too worried about him. I think he's going to be very good for a while. So yeah, that's looking at dynasty tight ends and where we're going from here. So I want to thank you all for coming in, staying with me on this episode, checking me out. I hope you guys enjoyed this week coming up forward. We'll be doing tomorrow. I'll be hopping on Aaron St. Dennis's show. We'll be doing a little bit of that. We're going to me and Prue got our Thursday show, so check that one out on Thursday. The Thursday Night Football Sleeper Picks. We've been red hot with those, so check those out. See where we're going to go, and then we got the Sunday show. I'm going to have another piece of personal corner content coming out. High Point Sports, the Des Bryant Company. I'm going to be dropping some more Seahawks content from there. So we got a busy week full of stuff, and we'll wrap it up Sunday with our sit starts. We'll be doing that live 9 a.m. West Coast time, 12 p.m. East Coast time. And yeah, so yeah, I look forward to seeing y'all later this week, hopping on all shows, and hope y'all take care and have a good night.